You can't wait for life to happen to you. It's all about making the first move. First to show up on set for a shoot. News roundup of the week. First to move the dialogue on social issues. And first to react to things on my show. When you know what you want, you need to take action. And your dating life doesn't have to be any different. Bumble gives women the power to go first, giving you the confidence to find the relationship you seek, or just someone who shares your passions. So make the first move. You won't regret it. Find what you're looking for on Bumble.
And in terms of I'm not comfortable with the idea of converting to a religion. That's
Yeah.
just something that's not for me, even though it's something I totally respect.
Yeah.
So in terms of dating, I look for people that aren't necessarily married to
Yeah.
one religion, but are sort of open to the idea of spirituality in general.
Welcome back to another episode of Looking For. I'm Amelie, and today we are looking for alignment. I'm here with my guests Melinda Strauss and Kennedy Daniel. Melinda is a Jewish TikTok creator, and Kennedy is a brand director at Juve Consulting. So whether or not religion or culture is at the forefront of your world or has shaped your upbringing in more subtle ways, today's episode will fully dive into Melinda and Kennedy's experience to help viewers navigate dating outside their immediate world. Hi guys, welcome to my living room. Thank you guys for coming. So how are you guys doing today?
Good, how are you?
So good. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for coming. So I'd love to just kind of jump into your guys' stories. Who wants to start? Where are you guys from, and how did you get here for this episode today?
Sure, yeah. Do you want to go first?
Sure. So I am originally from Seattle, Washington, born and raised. I live on Long Island in New York now. I was raised an Orthodox Jew, modern Orthodox Jew for those who understand the little differences, although it's all the same to me. But I was raised in a Jewish family. Both my parents were Jewish, are Jewish, and my siblings, all Jewish, were all raised very similarly. And I've kept the same level of religion since childhood to today. My husband is an Orthodox Jew. Our children are Orthodox Jews. And I'm really proud of that. My whole TikTok account is literally about being Jewish and explaining Orthodox Judaism, and I don't always fit the mold that people think when they see Orthodox Jew because of shows on Netflix and things like that. So I like that I can show people that there's more than just what they see on television shows.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Amazing.
And what about you?
I was born and raised in Los Angeles, California, so I'm a native. I have a really big background in communications and gender studies, so as part of my platform that I use for and part of my job is actually just deep diving into how people communicate and the best way to not only use that in marketing, but also just understanding people a little bit more, understanding people's culture.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things to do is to sort of have open conversations like this, just to see the similarities, but also the differences that make our culture that much more diverse and interesting. And the work I do for Juve is exactly that, sort of connecting people with Gen Z and with young people, because we are the future. And we have so many bright and brilliant ideas, but other generations also impact that. So having multi-generational conversations is really important to me.
That's amazing. And I want to just kind of start off by asking, is your husband originally Orthodox Jew?
Yes, we were raised very similarly.
Okay, so both of you kind of had that going into the relationship.
Exactly. And it's actually something that we discussed our values, and there's certain levels and nuances, we don't have to be the exact same, but for both of us, it was important to find someone similar in our Jewish values.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, if it's important to you, it's important in any relationship, because that's a very big part of your identity.
For sure. And I think it's something good to discuss.
Yeah.
When you're looking for someone, to know what you want, and also obviously be open to other people, because I think when people get too specific in what they want, sometimes it's harder to find someone. But to know what values you want, whether it's religious or otherwise. So for us, religion is at the forefront of our lives. So those values really lead us every single day. So we had certain things that were important to each of us, and we very much found our person.
Oh, that's really lovely.
Oh, thank you. Almost coming up on 16 years.
Wow.
Married,
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So as someone who studies communications, especially when it comes to culture and gender identity and that whole realm of life, how would you approach or kind of look at communications between someone who comes from a very different cultural background or religious background in a relationship with someone who's not super religious at all.
Yeah, well, something that we were discussing is that a lot of the times, like, so many different cultures have so many similarities. So it's really beautiful being able to find those similarities and to thrive on your differences, but really have the similarities be at your core.
Right.
But I think it's really important to talk about them, you know, like share your values. Like, this is how I grew up versus how this is how you grew up. And if you can find a commonality, I think that's beautiful. But if you can't, that's also okay. I think there's this idea that in order to be a good person, you have to see eye to eye with everyone. You have to give everyone a chance. And I do agree that it's important to give people chances and to date outside of your comfort zone and just like, you know, have open and honest communication with people. But I think if you have what's important to you and you want that, go out and get it and be like fearless in your approach for it, but also still understand how you can learn from other people as well.
Yeah, for sure. Did you ever like before you found your husband of 16 years almost, were you ever like with certain partners who didn't respect that part of you, or was that kind of like an automatic, I'm not even giving this a chance?
So I definitely only ever dated other Jews.
Yeah.
Some more religious, some less religious. So not everybody was the exact same way as I was. And, and I also feel like exactly like you said, that even within my religion, giving people a chance that we have other values that are in common. For me, dating someone who was Jewish was always important.
Yeah.
Because I feel like if you're dating, even though you may not be dating for marriage, you never know when you're going to fall in love with someone and want to spend your life with them.
Yeah.
So even when I was just in college and dating for fun with zero intention of marriage, which the college I went to, it's kind of like a lot of people, you go into college thinking, who am I going to marry? And I went into college actually thinking that, who am I going to marry? And then very quickly was like, I'm not ready for that yet. I was so young. But a lot of Jewish people get married very young, especially in religious circles. So that's where my mind was at. So I dated some who were more religious, less religious, and kind of felt my way around that to realize that I wanted someone similar to myself. And my husband actually, I think, is a little more religious than I am and has influenced me in a really positive way to become more strict on certain things that weren't necessarily important to me, but now they are.
Yeah. I think it's really important that, you know, especially like young people navigating through a dating life who come from really religious backgrounds and want to continue exploring that part of themselves as they grow older and like having that fit into their relationship because it's so ingrained to who they are. I think it's really important that dating apps give you the option to list out your ethnicity or have your religion like put on your profile, because that's such an easy way that you can connect with people from similar backgrounds and similar cultures. Bumble helps bridge the gap between culture and religions by providing features like Culturally Connected, where users can select what ethnicity they are and what religion they connect with to help sort through preferences. So basically you have the choice to list both or one or neither, so you can make known what's important to you and how you want to be seen. So we know that religious preference is important to you. And what about you? Like, are you single? What's your dating life like? Are either or both of those things important to you?
Yeah, well, I think it's incredible that they even have that feature in general. I am single right now. And when I was recently on Bumble, I actually saw that upgrade and I was really excited because I was able to not only put Black, but Caribbean. And I think also a lot of the time, especially now when we're having more conversations about race, ethnicity, and gender, people often put those two things together, race and ethnicity, when people have so many more diverse ethnic racial stories. So I think it's amazing that I can put Black, but I grew up with 2 Caribbean parents, and it's really important for me that people know that. In terms of like dating preferences, I typically put open to all because I genuinely feel like I can have connections with a lot of people. So I think that feature is really incredible, especially because I love that my friends who have maybe a religious preference can feel comfortable navigating a space and feeling seen. And then that makes the dating experience fun for all of us. And then it just makes us feel a little bit more connected to one another. Yeah, for sure. One of my best friends is very religiously Jewish as well. And it's important to her to be in relationships with Jewish men for her as well. And I think that like, especially as you're like entering the college space or you're just young and vulnerable and like going on dating apps, it's always important to feel like safe in that regard. So I think having an option where you can like outright list that kind of keeps you safe from any type of like, in this particular scenario, like any anti-Semitic people who you would potentially match with, or like any racist people who you would potentially match with. Like, I think it's really great that there are these options that just keep you protected from any kind of like malicious intent that can exist on any dating app. You know? So I think there's kind of a really big like social misunderstanding that Orthodox Judaism is kind of like this like one way of being, and there's kind of no room for dimension or range of thinking. So have you encountered that?
All the time. All people ask me different questions about why ask me all the time why I don't cover my hair. And as an Orthodox Jew, there is a law for Jewish married women to cover their hair. I choose not to follow that. It's not about pick and choose. I don't love that terminology, but I believe everything is picking and choosing. I think that we all make our choices in what's important to us. And for me, that was never important. And when my husband and I were dating, we actually discussed that. If that was something important to him, to have a wife who would cover her hair or would only wear skirts or would dress more modestly, those are things that I think it's important to discuss when you're dating within Judaism. It's not just check the box, we're both Jewish, but discussing what's important to each of us from a religious and law following standpoint. Happen to be, thank goodness, he really doesn't care. Like he just is so go with the flow with those things. And his mom doesn't cover her hair. My mom never did. So we really found that in each other. But if you're going to go on a date with someone and that's important, he said, I want someone who covers their hair, I don't even think we would have gone on a first date. Because that's something important. I was not planning to do that. So just being open and honest, like you said from the beginning, really having these discussions on what's important to you. And within Judaism, those things lead first. So not just discussing our personalities and what's important to us and are you a nice person, but also religiously, what are the things that are important to you?
And your expectations of the other person.
Okay, so Kennedy, you grew up in LA and you have Caribbean descent and you went to an Episcopalian school in the middle of K-Town, so you have a lot of Korean friends, but you didn't grow up with a specific religion. How do you navigate dating and how has that influenced your dating life?
That's a really good question. I didn't grow up with a predominant religion at all, but I was exposed to religion very early and all different types of religion. So I grew up with a very respectful sort of energy towards religions. In terms of dating, I don't intend on raising my children with a specific religion at all. If anything, I definitely consider myself more spiritual, and in Caribbean culture, actually a lot of the things that we pray to or the things that we believe in are based on our ancestors. So I think that transcends a lot of different cultures. So I've always been able to connect with people through those cultural artifacts, but I don't really plan on raising my kids with any religion. So the people that I date typically are culturally religious. So for example, I was telling you that a boyfriend of mine was Jewish, but he was more culturally Jewish. He was not necessarily practicing. And it allowed us to be able to sort of like open up and find the similarities in our culture a lot more. And in terms of like, I'm not comfortable with the idea of converting to a religion. That's just something that's not for me, even though it's something I totally respect. So in terms of dating, I look for people that aren't necessarily married to one religion, but are sort of open to the idea of spirituality in general.
I love that. I think that also just like lends itself to a very, like you said, respectful approach. I think that like a lot of the times we look at, in this particular day and age, like we look at religion and it's kind of, it's a very polarizing, you're either like, you're super religious and you're all for it, or there's people on the other end of the scale that are very anti-religious and don't approach it respectfully whatsoever, regardless of whatever religion they may be talking about. And I definitely think every child should be raised with an educational portrayal of religion. If you didn't grow up religious, or even if you did, just being exposed to different religions from an educational perspective, because I think that just breeds tolerance and respect. I study Middle Eastern foreign affairs, and that's what my major is, and I minor in Arabic, and like a lot of my time is spent learning about Islam and like reading the Quran and exposing myself to that religion. And that's not something that I grew up much around, but I think it gave me such a holistic perspective of that religion alone, just simply from an educational standpoint. And now I'm like starting to learn about other religions, just because I think it's given me such a fond appreciation of the way that religion allows people to feel certain aspects of hope or optimism, or I don't know, it's just such a grounding factor in so many people's experiences on this earth. And I don't know, I feel really deeply that it should be part of our educational experience, like looking at it through that lens.
And I feel as a Black woman specifically, I feel like I have to respect religion, because so many of my ancestors were only here today because they had religion, because they had something to believe in, and I can't not respect that. I can't be sitting here like in my pride as a Black woman and not acknowledge the fact that religion is a huge part of why my parents were even able to come to this country, is a huge part of my friendships. One of my best friends is Muslim, another one is Jewish. So like, I totally understand when I look at us at a dinner table, I'm like, I respect deeply the fact that we are all here because of different religions, but underlying all of those religions is hope. So I definitely see that.
For sure. So Kennedy, hypothetically, you're to go on a date with someone, you really enjoy them, you go on many dates with them, and you're just loving all the time you're spending together. They reveal to you that they're super Catholic or any other religion, and you don't come from religion, you don't plan to raise your kids with a religious lens.
Yeah.
How do you navigate that?
Yeah, I think that it starts with asking questions. So I'd love to just sort of deep dive into their faith and like where it really comes from. I think something I have an issue with sometimes is that people will use their faith as a way to escape having their own personal morals. So for example, they'll say, oh, well, the Bible says this. And it's like, okay, yes, but do you believe that fundamentally? Do you fundamentally practice that?
Yeah.
Is that something you grew up with? So I'd like to see how their personal values sort of align with their religion, and also how they go about their religion.
Yeah.
Like, are you interested in sort of walking around and converting people?
Yeah.
Do you look down upon other people that aren't practicing Catholicism or just practicing in general? I'd love to ask those questions, because I was saying earlier that a lot of religion comes from culture.
Yeah.
So if, you know, you grew up, like, for example, my father, he did grow up religious.
Yeah.
And when I was younger, if he was going through a hard time or he was confused in his life, or, you know, we sort of having family issues, he would take me to church, because that's how he felt connected. And when he lived in Brooklyn, he lived above a church. So I sort of was like, oh, this is a way for my father to connect with his parents who have now passed. This is a way for him to connect with his childhood. And that I totally understood. So even not associating with a religion, I said, that is so sacred. And of course I would go to church with you. Of course I'll go to temple with you. I'll go to mosque with you. Anywhere that I'm welcome, I would love to learn more about it. But I think it really has to come from a place of like, of your personal values aligning with the scripture that you also align with. But like I said earlier, I'm not interested in raising my kids with a religion. So if I see this person and I getting married and they're really passionate about raising their kids with that religion, I want them to have that freedom, and I want them to have a partner that also believes that. So if that's something that comes up in the conversation, I would definitely say, obviously I'm 23, I'm not trying to get married, but I do like to think about that. I'm not trying to waste my time, you know, like 2 or 3 years, like I don't think that we necessarily need to be doing that if like neither one of us is thinking about long term at all. But I so firmly believe that people should be justified and what's the word, but also just like validated in their culture and in their religious practices. So if I can't give that to you, like I want you to be able to go and get it from somewhere else. So we definitely have to have the conversation sort of about like marriage and kids. But like I said earlier, if anyone is even interested in me coming to their place of worship, like, oh, this would mean so much to me, or, oh, it makes me feel connected to someone, I would be honored to go. Even when I was in New York on a trip, I went to a church and I lit a candle for my grandparents, because that to me made so much sense. And I don't consider myself religious, but I felt so held in that space with that memory, because I know that my grandparents would have really appreciated that. So I think there's layers to spirituality and religion that I would definitely just want to have an open conversation with and learn something at the end of the day too.
That's really nice. How do you differentiate between spirituality and religion?
Ooh, that's a really good question. And I don't even know if there's a huge distinction. I just think kind of like whatever word lands for you. Like, for example, I do see religion like organized religion, like Judaism, Islam, stuff like that. But since I didn't grow up with that, I think I kind of adopted practices from my own culture as well as other cultures. And there's a lot of overlap of cultures. Like I'll talk about something that, you know, I know that my Caribbean ancestors or my grandparents did, and my friend who is Muslim, she'll be like, oh, that's something in my culture. So I sort of gather pieces based on the diversity of the people around me of like, oh, interesting. Like, for example, I do pray and I do manifest, but when I pray to my ancestors, and I pray to people who I think are watching over me. And maybe for some people that's a god, for me it's ancestors. So maybe those two things are different, but it's kind of like, okay, well, we have something there. It's similar. So spirituality for me really just comes from also acknowledging the fact that like I'm going to be in this body for the rest of my life, and I am sacred, and, you know, my mind and my body is really important. So also, like, I don't want to say praising myself, but also just acting as if like I am I'm my own
like deity kind of.
Exactly. And just making sure that I know that no matter what's going on around me, no matter what religion is presented to me, that like I am my own person, and that I really have to like take care of myself and make sure that I'm spiritually aligned before I can even do anything else.
That's really nice. I feel like I would consider myself pretty spiritual as well. I didn't grow up religious at all, but I do have like family members that grew up religiously. It just like didn't transcend into my household. But I feel like a lot of Gen Z is spiritual. Do you feel that way?
I agree. And I think also Gen Z is sort of blurring the lines of what spirituality means. And I'm not entirely sure how I feel about it. I think TikTok has something to do with that too.
For sure.
But I think also, like I was saying, that Gen Z is like, millennials are internet natives. Gen Z are social media and internet natives. So we have so much information constantly. I got an Instagram in 6th grade.
Yeah.
So like the amount of information that I've been
Yeah.
inundated with since I was 12, 13
yeah.
is crazy.
Yeah.
So I think that honestly it is a good thing to constantly be questioning like what's my spirituality, what's this, because you just have so much wealth of knowledge. Like I even knew your content before I even met you because I'd been scrolling on TikTok and it came up and I was like, oh, this is really interesting, and I don't think this is gonna fit into my lifestyle, but like I want to learn about this. It's really interesting. So, or even adopt certain things and I'm like, oh, that sits with me. So I think it's a good thing. But yeah, spirituality seems to be a buzzword recently.
For sure.
And I'd love to also hear like, in terms of spirituality, do you see there's a difference between religion and spirituality?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I know a lot of people who are very spiritual within Judaism who don't practice religiously.
Interesting.
So they don't practice all of the laws that we have, but they are very connected to God. Very connected. So they can be very different. I'm both. So I'm very, very spiritual. I have a lot of belief in my life, and with it also a lot of following the laws, which are also about belief, but also about like just trust and doing a lot of what some of it I do because it's just what I did my whole life. And I've spent, actually because of TikTok, I spend a lot of time educating myself on why I do the things I do.
Interesting.
In Judaism, there's 2 different types of laws. There are laws that were given by God that we follow, no question. There's no reason for them. One of them would be not eating pig. There's actually no reason in the Torah for not eating pig. We just don't eat pig. People give different reasons. They try and find reasons behind it. We just follow it because it's something we believe that God gave us for a reason, and it's to our benefit. And that's I think a lot of spirituality comes from that. And then there are laws that have the reasons behind them. So we do them, and we're supposed to ask a lot of questions in Judaism. That's one of the things I encourage my kids to do. So they're not just blindly following.
That's really
They
good.
ask a lot of questions.
Members of Gen Z in particular are a lot more inquisitive because we grew up like internet and social media natives. Like we just are exposed to so many new ideas that a lot of the times we question a lot more than I think previous generations did.
It's wonderful. And what we're seeing from it is people are working on their mental health more and not just doing because you're told to do, but actually doing it because you want to be doing it. Like I love that. I think that's such a huge part of Gen Z that I try and emulate for myself as a millennial because I think it works so well. Keep questioning everything and question not because you don't want to do something, but maybe even question because you want to understand why you're doing it.
That
if it doesn't work, don't do
that
it.
piece is so important. What I was saying earlier when I was like, I'd love to have a conversation with someone about their faith. I'd love to figure out where like their ambition comes from to follow those laws and like see really like what's motivating them, because I feel like there's so much to question, and it's really, really great.
Like I think a lot of the actual scriptures from religions people have blindly followed for so long and never questioned it, and now they're questioning the actual like written word and defining what religion means to them on their own terms, rather than just like preaching something that they don't believe in truly in their soul, rather than something they've been taught. So Melinda, supposedly one of your kids falls in love with someone who believes really strongly in a different religion. How do you approach that as a mother who's raised them to be one religion?
Well, it's not easy. I do want for them to marry Jewish people. We very much believe strongly in passing down Judaism from generation to generation to generation. So I share that with them, and I really try not to do it in a guilt way, because Jewish guilt is a big thing. So I really try hard not to do that, but I do talk with them even about it now. They're young, but you could start dating someone young and they could be the love of your life forever. At the end of the day, whatever decisions they make as adults are their decisions to make. They know that I love them no matter what. They know, and I've even discussed this with them, that I will never disown them. Whoever they love will be welcome in my home. I ask that they respect the rules of my home. And I hope that they would respect the things that are important to me in their home. But I'm hoping that they will marry Jewish. I cannot make my kids' decisions for them. And that's going to be what it is. And I know that. And no matter whatever it comes down to, I don't care. For me, the most important thing is that they marry someone who's Jewish. I don't care about any of the other things. I don't care what color they are. I don't care anything else, how they were raised, if they converted. None of those things are important to me. But what's important to me may not be what's important to them. So I'm trying to pass it down without the guilt factor. I can't say that I'm being perfect at it, but I'm hoping that I'm coming off with them as more open-minded. But there's always like a little bit of that like guilt in the back of my mind, for me when I was growing up, knowing like I'm going to date Jewish. But then because I want them to ask questions, I want them to ask me why.
Yeah.
So that they understand it's not just mommy says so.
Yeah.
I'm doing this for my mom. Do it for yourself.
Yeah.
But let me share with you the values that are important to me.
Yeah.
And then maybe, hopefully, those values will pass down to them too.
Yeah.
But I'll love them no matter what. That's
Yeah.
like fact.
Yeah. That's what every parent should do.
I think
I
so.
agree. I agree.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for coming. I had a lot of fun. I learned a ton. And you guys were both really engaging guests, so thank you for that.
Thanks for having us.
Of course. And let's all just remember that no matter where you are at in your dating stage, Bumble is a great place where you can figure out if you want to date inside or outside of the world that you grew up in. Religious preference or ethnic background, whatever it may be, you have the option to let people know where you are and how you want to be seen. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to Looking For. I am Amelie Zilber, and I will be back with another episode next week brought to you by Bumble right here on the Past Your Bedtime YouTube channel.